So I will call to order the City Council Transportation, Energy and Utilities Committee at 3:02. To entertain a motion on our agenda.
I would move to adopt the agenda as posted.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Next, we have adoption of our minutes. Can I have a motion on our minutes from our 6/21?
Yes, I will move them as presented.
Second.
Discussion comment. Which is, I think that although I understand the bare bonesness of this, there's so much detail that we've got that there's got to be an artificial intelligence in the Luddite that I am. Everybody knows, right? That I say this hesitantly, but I think that we've got to be able to capture the conversation more better.
We have been directed through the Chief Administrator Office's office to capture minutes in a more bare bones fashion, making sure that we link to the video now, but I can look into the AI summarizing feature and or the transcript, which might be cumbersome, but they did recognize that there are other kind of options we can use to post alongside of that, if that's what that is.
As long as it's going to be easier than having to look at the video, and if you can express my concern about that, knowing full well, you know, the amount of work that it takes to actually transcribe it, somebody who did that.
I just had a clarifying question. Said Rob, this is a directive coming from the CAO's office.
Yeah, there was a minutes taking policy that they had advised us to put into effect, I'd say probably about 3 to 5 months ago, which scaled back everything except the action items, like who made a motion, who seconded, general topics, and to link to the video, which is now also a requirement through public meeting law. I think they did make note of the fact that there are other transcription features like AI and like the general full summary that we could start posting if that meets the need, or if you know, if there's another way that the committee wants to handle it. I'm sure we can find a different middle ground, meeting the need that the city expressed along with what you prefer as the committee.
I concur, OpenG, in that trying to scan through the video to look for like a vote or something be a little bit cumbersome at times. But if you want to see sort of color on discussion, there may be features. I know in my company we've started playing with some of the transcription that's available through certain Zoom editions. I'm guessing that the city's version is full featured like that. We might be able to just see if we might be able to weave that in, because that comes almost for free.
I believe that when we started this, we didn't have AI transcription or summarizing, and now that has been an add-on. Certainly if others are more familiar, my colleagues weigh in, but we'll look into that and see if that works for these minutes for next month. If that works.
And if there's a link to a transcript that I can read, that would be great, you know. I don't need you to do that, but something that's really easy that would go with the minute, it would be in the minutes category, that as long as it works.
See what's available.
We'd be happy to do that. I'll revisit that policy. I'll stick with that while meeting your needs and see where we can land. And
I know that's come up in at least one other meeting as well. People are looking for less bare bone minutes, but I understand also you're trying to do so.
I bet that there's space we can find, so let me look into that AI feature, because that was mentioned as part of the new policy, so be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on adoption of our minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting our minutes, indicate by saying aye.
Chair, 1 second, we have Becca joining us. Sorry.
Rebecca, I don't know if
Thank you. I just made it in for what I think is the first vote. So aye.
Did you hear our discussion on the minutes?
I heard the last 2 minutes or so, which sounds good to me.
Okay, well then I will ask, take the vote again. All those in favor of adopting our minutes from our 6:24 meeting indicate by saying aye. Aye,
Aye.
that's unanimous. And next on our agenda is public forum. Is there anybody in the room who's here to speak up? Seeing none, I see Sharon Busher online has her hand raised. And anybody else online who wishes to speak in public forum indicate by raising your hand. Go ahead, Sharon.
Hi, good afternoon. So I want to weigh in on the minutes, but I actually don't want to lose track of why I really wanted to speak, which has to do with Riverwatch stormwater. So I want to come back to that. But so I have been in the streamline minute phase of the council. You know, everything's cyclic. Modern gov is really just a rehash of old gov, but anyways, I tell you that to think that the public is going to paw through a whole transcript of sometimes 2 hours to find what they're looking for, I don't think that's fair. And if there's a record check, I think that that's also something that really puts the public at a disadvantage. So to just have the topic and the action falls short. We did that at the Board of Finance for several years, where the minutes were meaningless, just totally meaningless. The topic was there. You didn't even remember what the topic was if you looked back several years. I mean, you knew the title, but you didn't know the essence of it. And so I understand this is cost saving, this is modern gov, but I think it falls short for record checks. I think it falls short for the public who might not be able to attend a meeting. And I think it's very labor intensive. I understand it also is labor intensive for people to create the minutes. But that's where I'm worried that all of you won't take the time to make sure that what's recorded is accurate. There have been things that have been misunderstood. And so I have a lot of concerns about the direction that the administration is going. And this, once again, tells me, just to an observation, there's no continuity, there's no history. Everybody is new, and they can't recall why some things that are perceived to be new ideas failed. You can build off of it. I'm not saying you have to go forward with the same depth or detail. You can build off of a recommendation, but use the past to guide you and come to a right conclusion. You know, that stupid pendulum swings all the way to the right and then swings all the way to the left, never lands in the middle where it's the logical place. So enough. You've just hit one of my buttons. I apologize, but there you go. So the reason I wanted to call in was because of the stormwater permits. And I just need some help understanding. I'm going to use Riverwatch because that's actually the one I care about more than the others because of its location. It's on Riverside Avenue. The stormwater goes across. You know how the bank on the other side of Riverside Avenue hasn't been stable, and we've had a lot of issues with erosion. And it starts at Riverwatch and all the other projects on that side, because all of that was an old dump. And so it's not all solid earth. There's washing machines and crap in there that have been buried. So there's some dirt, but there are lots of air pockets, so it's not stable. And so I am concerned that in these permits, there's nothing that would point out something that is unique to the site that needs special attention. And maybe that's done with another, there's no addendum, I mean, there's no attachment, but maybe that's done in another way. I don't know what that way is. But I scanned through it and it seemed pretty boilerplate. It didn't seem there was anything that jumped out at me to address this. Now, the other sites, Apple Tree Bay or whatever, it has the lake issue. I don't know if all those other sites have, they're all unique, obviously, but I don't know if they have things that need to be, and I didn't look at their contracts. I didn't look at them. But if there are unique, specific concerns and things that need to be detailed in these permits, I think they should be there. And if not, there should be a reference as to how this topic, this unique aspect of the site and the impact of stormwater, how that is addressed and how we as a city are aware of the problem and how we're trying to address it as we manage stormwater. So I hope that's clear, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon. Is there anybody else who'd like to address the two in public forum? Seeing none, I will go ahead and close public forum and that door. And I guess we'll begin our deliberative agenda, and the first item on our deliberative agenda is the 3 acre state operational stormwater permits into MS4. Sure, come on to the table and join us, and I'll let you.
Yeah, sure. My name is Seth Guggenbecker. I'm the stormwater program manager for the city. I guess to first off address the prior comment is those permits, like that's outside the scope of the permits. The permits are for the sites, and those are state issued permits that already exist. The outfall on the other side of Riverside wouldn't be part of these permits, really. And this agreement is mostly administrative stuff that we're looking at. But so yeah, just to kind of reiterate some of what was in the memo is we have there are 4 sites that have an operational stormwater permit with the city that the city is a co-permittee on, and those sites are subject to 3 acre permit requirements. Those 3 acre permit requirements involve the permit holders getting an engineering feasibility analysis and potentially having to retrofit the site to treat the stormwater on the site to the state's standards. The state gives us the opportunity to, instead of going that route, to incorporate those sites, bundle them into the city's already existing MS4 permit. That's the citywide stormwater permit. By doing this, it allows the city flexibility to implement those projects, which can be costly in other areas of the city where it's more economically, like our money can go farther, and we have a little more flexibility. And then those residents that live in these areas aren't having to won't have to pay the same sum of money that they would if they were to stay underneath their own individual permit that the city's committees on. That's this, and so this to allow that incorporation, the city just has to have a legal authority over the system that was permitted through the state, and to get that legal control over it, that's where these agreements come in. And so basically these agreements just allow business as usual, but if the private associations are not maintaining the infrastructure, then the city has the right then to go onto the property and maintain that infrastructure. So it's just making sure that now that the state doesn't have oversight, they know that the city has the oversight to make sure that the system that is already permitted is still being maintained.
Is there any questions from the committee?
So my question is about. So what system are we like, were we previously working under? Was it so? If the private VCs were not maintaining the infrastructure before, it was the state that had to come in, or the state had to case by case give the city the authority to come in?
Yeah, the state would have that authority if they were like the privately owned portion of the system was not maintained. Then the state would technically have to enforce that. And there's like annual inspection requirements, so. If we're doing the inspection, we'll say like, hey, this is not currently functioning as designed and this needs to happen, and typically that maintenance happens once it's identified, and but it would be on the state now to enforce that.
And so was there like what changed, I guess, is so is the state. Did the state relinquishing the authority, or we take them? Because it makes the whole process easier if we just go in, or so like a law passed, or like the governor, like
So
the state's relinquishing.
yeah, so the city through its MS4 permit has the option to incorporate the operational stormwater permits, those individual ones through. There's like a clause in that MS4 permit that's renewed every 5 years, and basically the best time to incorporate is when we're renewing our MS4 permit, because then we only have to give public notice once rather than renew our license, then go in and tell everybody we're going to incorporate. That's I can see. And yeah, sorry, that was the second part of that.
Are we just like, did something happen on the state level to make us need to step in here, or are we just?
So I guess when this 3-acre rule was passed, prior to that, like sites with 3 acres of impervious didn't have to do these engineering feasibility analysis, or the retrofits. And I'm not sure exactly when that 3-acre rule was passed, I think 3 to 5 years ago, but it's like now to the point where those permits, like people have to start acting and doing that stuff, and so now the time is for them to come in. The state recently extended that deadline a couple of years, but it still makes sense for us to incorporate now since we're trying to renew our.
Thank you.
Becca, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Go ahead, Gene.
The one big question I've got has to do with the due diligence that we will continue to have to conduct with regard to the financial viability of each of these associations to meet their obligations. Because once we incorporate them, then if they fail, then we have to go back to them. They have all these obligations and financial ones, but if they don't have a penny, then we've got to be able to, go after them. I have seen over my years around a sort of problems that relate to that. So I sort of want to understand the structure that we've got for all of these and any of the other ones that, if there are any out there, that will that we've got in place to continue the not only the I'll call it the structural liability of their system and how it relates to ours, but also their ability to meet their obligations, including their ability to put away the reserves that are necessary to do this. Because these are homeowners, right? And so, and this is an association of homeowners, each one of those. I just want to make sure that we've got that so that whatever issues we've got going forward are at the very least being financially.
Yeah, so this agreement was reviewed with the attorneys, the city attorney, and we do have a clause in here for insurance that these associations have to hold. I wish Eric was here to explain it more, the legal side of things. But that was thought of that section.
So you're looking at the insurance as being the fail-safe,
Yes,
and the insurance limits are sufficient in your estimate. And this is an agreement for how long?
indefinite.
So this is but the insurance, and I saw that there was insurance. That insurance, is there an escalator in that? Is there an opportunity to revisit its its acceptability? The word is escaping me, but you know where I'm going with that. Because in 10 years down the road, what is in place now will be significantly less in all likelihood. Reasonable. So I do see that there's a termination provision here, but nobody wants to go.
Yes,
So
I can certainly run that by the attorney's office and see if they have any thoughts. That.
are these going to the city council for
Yeah, they ultimately need the mayor's signature or designee. So,
but not the city council and the city council?
Question says, city, it's a
Yeah,
city council.
So
Gonna have that promotion.
yeah, I just want there to be a sort of an assurance.
It says we can, every 10 years, we can revisit, we start looking at the Southland agreement. I'm guessing that they're all.
What number, where is that page?
number 6 on page 3.
Yeah,
Okay.
number 6, page 4 of the.
Which is is that the insurance?
Yes. And it says that the city.
Okay, I see that.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Okay. So I think that I would just like a double sort of assurance as part of the motion, which I would make anytime you're ready, that I would want to have just an assurance by the attorneys and the department division and anybody else in the city that would be appropriate to the city in terms of matchup. To just look at its the financial safeguards to make sure that we have got in place the ongoing way to do that. It looks like not more than every 10 years means that we can do it 10 or 15 years. We miss the dates. It's not like excuse me. So anyway.
Do we have other questions? I have questions around, does this like formalizing something that's new, that's being, an action is being taken place because of you said it's like the new stormwater regulations that came from the state. I only ask this because I know this, I mean, I'm familiar with one of these, which is the Strathmore, which is in my district, and there's been conversations that I've been involved with, and ultimately this this addresses those concerns, and I didn't know if it was the Strathmore thing, and then we just said, well, we'll take all of them, or we were sort of
Yeah,
handling these things informally up until now.
yeah, they're mostly informally until now. The Strathmore, we've had more discussion with the HOA about some of that stuff that wasn't necessarily written down, so we more defined roles of does what and what is to the benefit of just the residents versus what is to the benefit of the city. And so that Strathmore one has a little bit more in it because there was more cloudiness around that needed to be defined.
But the decision to do all of them, I said, well, we're gonna deal with Strathmore, so we'll
Yeah,
deal with all of them.
so we originally just identified those sites that we could incorporate into that made sense. So that the city and the residents didn't have those obligations of the 3 acres, and then we became aware of the Strathmore lack of definitions through this process.
And with regard to Strathmore, it's the one where there isn't approval by the HOA yet, but there's a tentative HOA.
Yeah, we've been working with Tom Papp, who is the HOA president, and then yeah, we had an email correspondence with him back and forth, and he said he had agreed to our most recent direction, just hasn't approved.
Do you
this
know
draft.
when they're gonna be meeting to ratify this on their own? I would either want to incorporate in our city council motion pending approval by
Yeah,
Strathmore
it would be
HOA, or I'd wanna make sure that we took it up in city council after that.
yeah, haven't heard from Tom when exactly it would be ratified, but I guess it would be pending them approving it.
And is there time sensitivity around this? Could we wait until Strathmore?
Yeah, we could, it's mostly it's just. We've been waiting on Strathmore a little while, and this was kind of their deadline to get us an answer by this date, but we could extend.
Councilor Carpenter had been doing a lot of correspondence with Tom Papp, the HOA president. And, or at least the point person for this issue. And so I could certainly try to help better understand. If
Yeah. I'd appreciate the help, I guess. Like I said, it's just, we had a couple of emails earlier this week and Friday and calls, but just haven't. Sure he's missing.
So it seems as if you've used this timing as a way to say, make a decision where you're gonna be on the hook or on your own with the state. And I hear you spending time with them, I see us spending political resources, then you were like, okay, we've got these other ones that are pending. My inclination is to sever them out and to pass on the other ones. And if they come up with their solution by whatever the deadline is, then you would amend this to add, to add it in. That's not absent there being, any changes in this, because it's consistent with what we were deciding on there. But that way, that they are, just waiting and waiting doesn't sort of do this. And my recollection is that there is a history of foot dragging on things that relate to the public sector, like zoning and the cleaning up of issues related to encumbrances on their permits that the city attorney's office was involved in. So that would be my inclination, this, so that you're not just stopped by them who, sounds like it's no skin off of our nose. If they don't sign this, then they're on the hook with the state, unless am I missing something?
They'd have the option to, yeah, continue business as usual until we have to issue our next NOI to renew our MS4 permit 5 years down the road, so.
So are you suggesting that we have, we divide the question
Yeah,
and we make one motion on 3 of the permits and then perhaps make another motion?
I would be happy to do that if I can
Pending approve, if they were able to get approval by their association by the time we're taking the others up in council, we take theirs up as well.
Yeah, if I can vote
I don't know.
let's see if I can pull that off. Okay, Robert, this is now a test on how you're gonna pull this together for the minutes, right? Whenever anybody's ready.
So yeah, I mean, if there's no other discussion on this from any other counselors, I guess I would entertain those motions.
So I would make a motion to, and let me just see this, thank you, to approve and recommend that the council authorize the mayor or designee execute stormwater agreements with Southwind Ledgewood, with Franklin Square, and with Riverwatch condominiums. Subject to a final review and approval by the city attorney and a certification of the financial protections that are afforded the city, giving the ongoing nature of these agreements.
Second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that one passes unanimously.
Okay, the second motion is to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the mayor or her designee to execute the stormwater agreement. I'm gonna say herein, meaning the documents that this committee has got with the Strathmore Apple Tree, Strathmore and Apple Tree, is it point? HOA, is that correct? Subject to the final review and approval of the city attorney and a certification of the financial sufficiency of that agreement, consideration of term nature of this contract.
Second. Any other discussion on that?
I think what that means, just to be clear, is that if this agreement changes in any way, we gotta come back for. Okay. That's okay, because we should hear it, and we should feel okay about that. So they've got approval on this. If they want to start to monkey around with it, then it's gonna take a little bit.
And this way we're not holding up the other 3. Okay, any other discussion on this motion? Did you capture that? Any questions on it?
I think I've got it,
Okay.
and also got the recording, so I think we're okay here.
Okay.
That's clear to Seth as well.
Okay, seeing no other discussion. Call it, all those in favor of the motion as made by G. Okay, by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. So I think you have,
Thank you.
thanks so much. Next on. It's and of course, this is where
Favorite room.
Yeah, it's the Champlain Parkway southbound opening evaluation.
No, do not name it after.
Get enough Google votes. Corey Mims, Senior Public Works Engineer. Yeah, this was a council request previously to come forward and look from the project side at options for a potential early opening of the at least outbound or southbound portion of the Champlain Parkway from Elm Avenue out to 189. Request made in relation to trying to help address traffic issues noted other portions of the south end with the construction between Main Street, Parkway, and other things going on in the city. We're seeing that our road network, which is small but mighty, is struggling to work as well as we hope. That being said, there was a lot of logistical issues noted previously, and I know that part of this discussion was just come on the project side, looked into it in some regards. We're still working on some other options that might potentially work. But I was just more or less going to give kind of a summary of kind of where that roadway section sits, what remains to be done, and what at least the initial sort of conversations have been with the contractor regarding feasibility of expediting a portion of the roadway to be opened early. Really, people have seen it. Yes, there was a very poor news report, very inaccurate on the status of the roadway as it relates to it being supposedly
Which end?
WCX.
Shocking.
Yes, and so it was definitely pushing a lot of false news, and it was a little disappointing to see. While there is base asphalt put down, that by no means means that it's open and ready, that we're nor safe for people to be in there operating in any method or mode. This is a limited access roadway section, meaning that there shouldn't be people on any other mode besides a vehicle along that section when that section is formally opened. At this point in time, there is no open to public about that roadway. It's an active construction zone, and as such, people should detour around as the detours are noted. That being said, yes, there is base asphalt that has been placed this year, but there are a number of other features that still need to be installed along there. The biggest thing is, in order to open that thing or even consider opening it, we need to have it at a safe level of service for the users, as well as, if not completely 100% finished, the workers that still have to complete the work in that area. As such, the initial conversation with the contractor is, we want to get everything done and be out of there before we open. We don't want to have to manage vehicles driving at what is a 55 increased up to 55 mile an hour area, because that is a transition zone of traffic, and when you don't have any stops, controlling of vehicles is, even when you have stops, still difficult when people aren't paying attention. So there were some conversations, concerns stated. Just real quick, running down the list of other things that still have to occur prior to us getting to that point is, there's no curbing installed along that section yet, and that still has to happen. That's going to be a 3 to 6 week progress depending upon weather conditions, and that's a sub that has come in, does that work. That same sub is also working on Main Street and other things. So their availability is limited to what we can request them to do. And so we can't necessarily expedite the sub to be outside to do a portion of the work. So we're still working through that a little bit. There's a lot of signage that still has to be installed on I-189 as well as that section of roadway to meet the requirements for that section to be considered to be open. Those tasks will also require some disruptions on I-189 and likely potentially be some night work associated with that. But those are some large overhead structures that have concrete bases, electrical wiring, and signage associated with that for the 189 and coordination that with the state group there on 7. With that, there are light poles that are up. There's still the wiring that needs to occur to those while the conduit's installed. There still has to get final connections. Lighting would have to be up and running. Also is another along that new roadway section. That also is something that we have to coordinate with BED as per the contract. Contractor does most of it 90%, but BED still has some work that they also are responsible for doing as they take over that infrastructure at the completion of the project. Along with that, there's the landscaping portion of work that was part of the Act 250 that it needs to be installed along the roadway section there in the middle median divide between the incoming and outgoing lanes. That work also is anticipated to be done this fall currently. There's a window of time in which they can do those plantings. And that work generally the contractor would like to have done prior to the final roadway surface so that marring and other things don't happen to your final work course. When you get to having that installed. Additional safety features is guardrail replacements that still have to occur along that section. There is existing guardrail in areas that is still to be removed and replaced. There is some stuff that has been replaced already at this point. That's still an ongoing item that needs to occur. That also is something that generally the contractor wants to perform prior to having a finished roadway surface. It just protects the final product. Obviously line striping, final pavement and line striping are things that would need to go in. And there's also, I believe there's rumble strips along a section of the roadway as well that would need to be installed in that final order. That being said, they do have quite a bit done. And so they are, it is looking good per the contract, the initial contract. They have until June of 2026 to complete the work. The contractor initially, when awarded the contract, had wanted to try to attempt to get the whole contract done in FY20 or in calendar year 25 as much as possible. But obviously, as we know, there was some action taken by council to really address some concerns with the functionality and the what the response would be with the signalization up at the Maple and King intersections with the new moving from a four-way stop condition to signalized intersection. And so a obligation of a 3-month observation period was placed on the project. With that, the contractor pivoted a little bit in their scheduling and their initially submitted schedule to try to accommodate council action. So that being said, just being candid, the initial response when first brought to the contractor was, all right, first you tell us to stop, now you tell us to go. So again, it was, we're still working with them, talking about what's feasible, what's options. That being said, there's a number of safety concerns really that come down to the idea of opening it early, that we're still trying to figure out how can this be best managed, and then also what are the costs going to be to, if those can be met, then what would the cost be? Because you're looking at additional mobilization potentials to try to not get the workforce done right away. To get the guardrails in on that section out, to get the lights up and all functioning, to get your final pavement, if you don't have everything done at the same time, which is usually one boat, go out and complete as much work and then move on to the next phase. And you're trying to expedite just one part of it, then that could extend, obviously, the time the contractor takes to get the other side done as well, which would go into 26. And currently they're planning to have that final workforce work in FY26. Calendar 26. Some of the other options we are working and talking with though is if it's possible to accommodate some night and weekend situation. That's if enough features can be put in place to allow that to occur. Or when they're not down there, just to see if there's something else that can be worked to try to I guess meet the intent of what councilors have been asking and looking for in regards to early opening. But we have to look at also what is, so the risks and costs associated with that. I would say both from a safety standpoint, making sure we have enough there that we feel comfortable putting people on that roadway section, as it is an active work zone still until work is complete. Also, again, early on, we talked about our state and federal partners also have to approve of us if we are looking to incur additional costs associated with these requests, that they may not want to risk the potential integrity of expediting work, and also what that means for your warranty period. Because if you're telling them, hey, we want this to be done now, and that wasn't what they planned, then and things are occurring potentially out of season for that work type, then we are just potentially looking to void our warranty of that product. And if anything goes wrong, then it's fully on the city if we're allowed to move forward in that manner. So those are the things that we're trying to be careful of and try to address now before we make a decision of whether or not formally looking to request, action on the part of the company. That generally was kind of what I had as far as just kind of an updates of where we stand, kind of the concerns that we have, the conversations that are still being held. We don't have dollar amounts associated with this yet because we don't know what this would look like. The idea that we wholesale get the thing 100% finished early is a dollar amount that we don't know, and then obviously that'd be a significant change in schedule for the contractor and also multiple mobilizations and the liability aspect of having to then finish work adjacent to an active roadway versus having them traffic going through an active site as they work on both sides, potentially trying to finish certain tasks. Which again is not from the first blush, not an ideal situation for anybody.
So this is all in response to the city council's question, you know, can this be opened southbound a little earlier, ahead of schedule? What can we do is I think what you also asked of us. As Corey has elaborated, we've looked into this, there's still a lot to do, and I don't know that opening it early is going to gain us a lot. The contractor is working to be ahead of schedule. But they do still have in the contract a reasonable amount of time to finish this if things go wrong. I don't know that DPW's on, after hearing with the contractor and having had these discussions, I don't know that we're on the page of saying that we do want to recommend opening it southbound, knowing all of the challenges and concerns and risks that we could face, if this is something that we want to pursue heavily at this point. So here for that discussion before we provide our kind of formal communication back to the city council on that.
One other last thing just to add into that too is, you know, with any construction, weather is up in the air. We are getting towards, you know, we're hitting mid, almost end of July. We have a wet fall that makes for a lot of the finishing work that needs to occur. Very weather dependent. Can't really put line striping down when the weather's wet weather. So that is also something that can play a factor in even if they were to expedite or try to expedite, that it still might not be met due to just conditions out of our control.
So committee members, questions?
I just have a request, if this comes back. If you could have a copy of the action that we asked you to take so we can get that. I don't remember, to be quite honest.
Yep.
You know, and so, yeah, just whatever that is, whatever that was, whatever form it was, whether it was a motion, whether it was a resolution, whether it. And the sort of the details of it, and part of this is just, if there are ways, if it's easy, I can try to find in the minutes myself, you know, like how I voted, if it was a resolution or a motion, but just trying to understand that context.
This was not a referral to.
No, it was your resolution about all of the downtown improvements in response to the business.
Oh, this was on the 19th.
Yes.
Oh, I
this
voted
is-
against that. Okay, no, I remember that fiasco.
Well,
Okay,
there was some worthwhile things in there too.
I tried to get there.
Regardless of anyone's thoughts, but
I
the
tried to get
it's a reasonable question to have asked.
there. There you go. Thank you. So yes, I mean.
Whether or not the parkway could open southbound.
So
Sooner rather than.
just if you know, if you can identify sort of like the top of the, you know, the top of it, it can be a cut and paste. I don't need the whole, I forget how many pages it was, but just with relationship to this, to go, oh, yeah. It's to jog my
Yep.
my nightmares.
Other questions? Go ahead, Buck.
Thank you. This all sounds reasonable and I really appreciate you actually, you know, taking the actions that were indicated in the resolution and coming back to us with options and your professional expertise. It sounds like you've looked into this really carefully and I would tend to agree with your assessment. I was just curious about a little specific thing that's come up in this discussion and then also came up with the Main Street discussion, which is the idea of having traffic going while work is going, which I mean, anyone logical can see that that could raise safety issues. But just since that discussion came up, you know, I've noticed plenty of times drive on the highway and there's work, you know, this does happen regularly with lots of construction projects and even at much higher speeds than we would be seeing in either of these. So I was just curious, Laura, if there's like, do we have a city policy about this? Does having roads open while construction is going cost like 4 times as much? I just love to hear a little bit more about your thinking on that and how it factors into things, because when I've heard it from, you all paraphrasing the contractors, it kind of sounds like, well, this is not an option, it's not safe. And then in other scenarios, it seems like other contractors are able to do this all the time and it's pretty run of the mill. So I'm just trying to reconcile that in my own understanding.
Yep, so this is a highly nuanced question. And yes, in most cases, you can do construction work while maintaining vehicles. However, that type of information is usually part of a bid package. So in the example of the Parkway was bid with the expectation that the contractor would manage and have the site entirely to themselves until it was live with traffic in that section. So they would have put inside of their bid the right amount of protections, or in this case, kind of the lack of protections, the lack of literal dollars that are required to be able to make a site safe to work next to live traffic. Additionally, the Parkway is challenged by the fact that it is not an existing road, and so it just doesn't have some of the necessary base infrastructure in it to allow traffic on it. And so the next measure is just pretty extraordinary to get to that phase of putting live traffic next to active new traffic while we're building a new roadway. We didn't require that the initial contract for the Champlain Parkway be open because, again, it's recognizing when you're building a brand new roadway, you can't put live traffic on it until there's enough familiarity in place for people to know what they're going to need to do on this road section. This is why you generally can get away with having live traffic next to existing construction sites. It's an existing road, it's an existing facility. People are generally familiar with it. They know how to generally navigate it. That all said, we're in a point in time in society where we are struggling greatly with getting vehicles to understand where they can and can't be. We are turning people around inside of highly visibly road closed areas all the time and seeing some very unsafe behavior. And so in an interest of trying to make sure that we are prioritizing our pedestrian safety first over vehicle safety, I do think that Public Works is leaning towards supporting more roads closed to live traffic and having work zones occur that way. We have a limited amount of space and we really do need to prioritize what is there and when and why. But again, other areas of the state and other states in the country have different options. They usually work with a lot more right-of-way width, and usually a lot less pedestrians. I do say, when I've visited other large cities that are doing massive downtown reconstruction projects, they close their streets to their vehicles. They prioritize their pedestrians to take the full width of the road. There's some phenomenal Google Street View photos now of like Montreal doing their roadway projects. It's Google Streets walking the street as the pedestrian to try to get these views. So I do think we want to think about how we are moving forward in select areas, and think we have made the right choices, but can acknowledge, yes, it is a little confusing when you can watch other locations have construction adjacent to vehicles.
Great, thank you. That was so thorough and helpful. And because for myself, being newer to the council, I wasn't there for the discussion when this contract was being made. And so it sounds like if there was a robust discussion, I think just from my perspective for future projects, this is definitely, I think, something we need to think really carefully. I'm thinking about Cherry Street and reopening St. Paul and Pine and things like that. I think when we get to the contract finalization phase there, that's something that all of us should be asking a lot of questions about and continuing to engage with your office and your perspective on that. So thank you.
I agree.
Thanks, Becca. Others have covered my questions. I guess I would say I'm cognizant of the fact that the trying to do early opening or partial opening would probably be more expensive, just as it was when we had the discussions. And the nights and weekends option doesn't make sense because we're looking for ways to relieve congestion, and there's less congestion on the nights and the weekends trying to get southbound out of the city. So it doesn't seem to be a lot of value on that, at least on the surface for me. but perhaps there'd be other arguments for that, but I appreciate all the thoroughness as well. Like exploring this, trying to run to ground, make sure there is a place to sort of ease some of the congestion that I think a lot of the Burlington residents were doing right now, trying to get around. I'll tell you that anecdote. It has nothing to do with the connector, but yesterday I was in the mayor's office and I talked to Joe McGee and he told me about the banners that they put up around the fencing at Memorial Auditorium. And I had to spend the next like 20 minutes trying to get myself from City Hall up around and following up south so I could come back north to go by Memorial Auditorium so I could see those banners. So it is a bit of a puzzle right now. But
Yep.
that's just that's a comment on the greater construction problem. But we're gonna have awesome roadways at the end of it all.
It will be great.
It'll be great.
Green Street. The Green Street.
Yes.
So I have nothing further. Does anybody else have anything further? There's no action on this. It's appreciate the update.
Yep, we will kind of formalize everything that we've done, learned, and provide reasoning and recommendation back, kind of communication to the city council in response. And just we'll certainly check in with Council President Travers to make sure we see how he wants that on the agenda. If he wants it as a communication or just more discussion.
Appreciate that. So I think you may be up here for our next item, which is the unaccepted streets next steps. And this is something just to sort of set this up a little bit. I had a constituent who called me about a problem with North Avenue Extension. I think it's technically Bobo Street. It's the one as far north as you can go until you hit the Whiskey Road. And they had a gigantic problem. I went up and looked at it myself. You couldn't even drive a car through this thing. You had to go around it. And they were wondering if the city might come and help them with that. And through my discussions with Chapin, I came to understand this is one of our unaccepted streets. I know we passed engineering standards to say that we're going to accept streets. They have to be brought up to the standards before we would accept them. And that was very challenging on this particular piece of roadway. And I know there's others. So
Yep.
We added this to the two sort of agenda items, and we're taking it up here today.
So yeah, we're here to have a bit of a conversation, thanks Corey, about what we want to do for next steps. And I think the next time we come back, we'll have something that is more formal to present, but I want to start a conversation to see which direction we want to go in. So North Cove is a great example. Throughout my time here at DPW, we've had various different streets and neighborhoods kind of come up in this like, you used to do X, Y, and Z, please come help. This looks terrible. It's time for you to do X, Y, Z. So the challenge here is that as we have learned more about what we've been doing kind of philanthropically throughout the city, it became really clear specifically during the first round of COVID budget analysis that we were doing a lot of kind of help and support for streets that are in this odd limbo of being deemed unaccepted. They're in this unaccepted category we talked a little bit about last time, failed associations. Some of these are a neighborhood had intent of handing over their streets to the city and documentation is not there. And there's a lot of different kind of phases of where those are all at. That said, there's also a reasonable number of private streets that the city provides some level of maintenance. Plowing is by far our biggest service that we provide to our bucket of unaccepted streets. Some of these others that are.
Excuse us, this is the TEUC.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
Some of the other services that we provide or had provided in the past are bringing stone and doing a light level amount of grading with our equipment. We do not actually own a grader, but we would do it with some of our larger front loader buckets, for example, to be able to level out some of these dirt streets. The city attorney's office, as we've asked about ownership of the different streets, some of these practices has advised us that we need to be very clear that providing these philanthropic services are not a requirement and are not gonna be implied ownership. And so we do need to provide some sort of formal notification to these streets that these are unaccepted streets based on the city's record and that we are not required to provide any level of maintenance. And that we need to work on phasing out our practice of providing services on these different streets. It's not a hard and cold stop, but it is recommended that we do stop doing the services for free on the unaccepted streets where we have confirmed records for sure, and where ones are kind of the hearsay of unknown or unaccepted. So that is kind of the basis of this. There is a side component that we struggle with our recycling trucks, and other recycling companies also struggle. Trash haulers are supposed to struggle with this, is that when you find streets that are in the condition of Elbow Street, that they are damaging their vehicles going down them. And so as it relates to the condition of the streets, once these are fully in the ownership or in the category of unaccepted, and that we are definitely not providing maintenance to fix its surface, we may need to at some point in time provide notice to these residents that they will have to bring their recycling up to the edge of the right of way, similar to other condo associations, because it's not safe for vehicles to enter. So those are the challenges. What DPW would like to do is provide a notice to all of our confirmed unaccepted streets this fall of the intent to and stopped practice of providing gravel and light grading to the streets. Most of this has already been done informally through emails, phone calls, other types of communications with neighborhoods. Some of them still call and ask, you used to do this, why can you not do this anymore? And we've still been saying no. So this is not a big lift on these neighborhoods, other than the fact that they've been in low maintenance for the last 5 years. What the communication would also say is that we intend to stop providing snowplow services as of September 2026. So we'll still move through this winter in the same protocols that we've been doing, but need to provide a notice that we won't plow them the next season. How to overcome the hardships, because these neighborhoods are certainly places that are some of our underserved population, are not organized as possible homeowner associations, neighborhood associations, or any sort of way, shape, or form. I've talked with our right-of-way manager about offering options where they could hire DPW to come and plow, or they could hire DPW to bring gravel and do kind of the minimum service. This is certainly going to be one of the most affordable options that any of these neighborhoods could do, but it provides the clear path of the fact that DPW is not trying to imply our ownership over the streets. Again, they are in varying different states of what looks like a street standard, very, very close. Some have curbs, some have pavement, some don't have a sidewalk. Others are gravel camp roads. And would be really, really far from our street acceptance to accept a street like this. There's definitely kind of a hot list. North Cove, Elbow Street, there's a lot of tiny streets in the east end of the city off of Chase Street and Colchester Ave that are routinely reaching out to DPW for the gravel and the plowing. And then there's one in the Old North End, and I butcher its name.
I'm off North Avenue.
Nope, Old North End.
No, off of North Avenue by Scout by Manhattan Drive, Washington Street.
And those people are super quiet. They leave us
Except
alone.
except for the sewer.
Yeah, that's a different problem.
It's
Choleric Court. Is
Oh,
that-
yeah,
oh,
Yep, Choleric Court, it's off of Intervale.
Yeah.
Avenue.
They are
Right
a
by
more
Spring,
recent,
right across from Spring.
they're a more recent addition to our conversation. So generally, again, the lack of gravel maintenance, we've been managing the conversations and not providing any services, and I think unfortunately some of the streets have tried to survive the last 5 years, but are really getting to a point that they're in very poor condition. The snow plowing one is going to come as a bigger surprise to a lot more streets. As I review the risk. So this is where we're at. from the advice of the city attorneys trying to take some sort of action. We could extend the timeline, we could, I don't know, come up with other creative solutions, but.
Committee members?
It would be very helpful to have a listing of the streets. It would be ideal for them to be in words. It would be great if if there was an ability to see when the street was created or that little development that got that information, because that will give us an indication of how long standing this is, how it happened. And I think that reducing what you said to writing and having it go to the full council. The important, because every council at the very, I mean, if not every councillor has got an unaccepted street in it, then maybe that's not necessary, but I do think that probably enough. And that there are also enough budgetary, so I sort of take that back. There are budgetary considerations that exist for the entire city, so I'm saying there ain't any unaccepted streets. Eric still has an interest in making sure that the funds of the city are expended and are raised in the appropriate way, and so it implicates when we spend money on things that don't have the obligation to, that means that we don't spend it on something else, so. I take back the exception for those who may not have an accepted street on, and say that probably should go to the entire council so that we can.
We would absolutely take this to the full council. This
I think this
is
is-
coming back to the TEUC with kind of a draft communication that we'll continue to work on, and then it go to the website council.
I'm almost thinking that even preliminary to like, this is what you're deciding, just to give to everybody else. You've already been here for effectively as a weather report. Now, you want to share that with other people because they have an interest in it. It's not mediated by our conversations here than what we say to them. So that would, I think, make the most sense. If there's a way to be able to list per street, what are the costs that we're expending categories or in some sort of ballpark?
Are you referring to like our current?
Gravel, like what the cost of snow plowing is, and ultimately, these questions are gonna come down to, well, is it gonna cost us $50 to do it, or is it gonna cost us $5,000? I'm just pulling that out of my hair.
And I can work with the city attorney's office to see if there's some sort of communication, I as a human, I am completely on board with where you guys are at. It doesn't feel great to be having to have this conversation.
Yeah.
We're not doing it because of the budget, but there is an implied ownership that we put on it, and I don't know if there's some other, document or agreement that we can get with the streets that we are just never gonna accept. That could allow us to provide some amount of service without somehow making it become a public right of way.
There may, part of the inventory, which includes not just the streets, but the cost. Can be then the creative. So I'm gonna stop because I promised to do that, except to say that, land banking as a way to, this perhaps these are not owned by anybody, or they're owned by a long dead developer, right? So they're really in legal limbo, and how that, and then the question of taxation, there get to be these other issues, and if there's a land trust option that could like buy them, that we've got relationships with, that all of a sudden becomes factored in. I don't know, this is out of the box thinking.
This will uncover that through the process of confirming the unaccepted status.
Yeah, so.
They're in limbo for a reason, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, lost the clip.
Go ahead. Yeah, I second his comments, but I guess like I do remember the meeting where we first talked about this, but I am forgetting, I guess, the basic context. So I understand the basic difference between a private street and unaccepted street, where a private street is hopefully maintained by our private entity. And an unaccepted street is not claimed or owned by the city, maintained by the city. But is it always not claimed / owned by a private entity? Or is it just nobody knows?
I think it's a combination of three and maybe even more. Because we have private streets that are claimed and owned by an association that I have seen on the list that occasionally we have plowed. I can see private streets, Chittenden and Iranistan are a great example. I 100% know who the owner is, and they are doing a very poor job maintaining the pavement, and we plow it. On the unaccepted street category, the arrangement of parcels in our database, there's places where it looks like there's an intent to give a right of way, whether it is exclusive to the neighborhood or it was meant to be part of the public. North Cove is a great example. People are very parceled in that neighborhood. And in their deeds, the streets that are in there, Elbow, North Cove, Main Street, and Bacon Street, are all listed as rights of way, but they're not listed as public rights of way. They're listed as rights of way for other property owners to be able to get deeper into their neighborhood. And there's definitely no intent or documentation that they've ever tried to give it to the city or that we've ever accepted it. And then there are ones that look like giant parcels with one house on it, and they own a street and they have a couple of neighbors next to it, which becomes even more gray because the person's parcel who looks like they own the street are like, I don't know this, I bought this house 2 years ago. What the heck? I don't own the street. I'm not maintaining it. What about all my neighbors? So there's lots of different stories out there, unfortunately. Again, some are more clear, some are gonna get a notification this fall, and then there's some that we're still gonna be chasing in 5 years.
That's fascinating. So I guess, that's very fascinating. I am wondering, like, this is obviously like something that we're, I guess, taking a look at and seeing like, well, the city does not claim or own these streets. Why are we providing services to them? And I think you said at the beginning of our discussion that, the reason the city is not claiming some of these streets is because they are dealing with certain code.
So we maintain an engineering standard for saying that a public way or public right of way should include space for vehicles, space for pedestrians, paved, curbed, sidewalk, proper sewer, water, infrastructure, kind of some minimum standards. That said, in this kind of era of accepting streets, we've accepted streets that things are not perfect. And we'd love to get a Strathmore or a Star Farm neighborhood, brand new pavement, brand new curb, brand new sidewalk. That'd be amazing. But there's enough unaccepted streets out there that we're gonna, if we choose to accept these, we're taking some compromise on its condition. Generally, we want to make sure there's enough space so that if we're using the equipment that we own to do these tasks, that we're not damaging it further, and that there's a way for us to do it, that we're not purchasing special.
Okay, yeah, that all makes sense. Yeah, I guess I don't have any more questions. Yeah, I'm just looking at the map of the unaccepted streets. Interesting. I'm kind of like obsessing over this right now. I want to see who might own these streets. If no one owns it, I think we should be talking about what that process looks like. If there is truly like an instance of everyone has their hands in the air, it's not our street, or it's a, like, example, if someone buys a house and that house also happens to own an entire street for some reason. I don't want to see our streets, whether we own them or not, go into disrepair, obviously. Same thing, obviously, what the process of reclaiming them would be a long process, obviously, but yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks for, Becca, do you want to get in on this?
No, I'm good. This is a complicated web and I'm glad somebody's looking at it, but I do not have any answers or any questions at this point. Thank you.
So thank you for covering that, and I too am interested in the list of what streets. I know some of them, and I'm sure there's others. So you mentioned that I was aware. And you know, I'm not sure where I am on whether we should or shouldn't provide services. We are spending an inordinate amount of money right now on things we consider priorities in the city, that aren't like the basics, like which are like, you know, streets. And so this is like one of the things, streets and sidewalks is like one of the basic services that city residents expect from city government. We do a lot, we go way above and beyond in some areas. And so I think it is a matter of priorities. And I would like to see the list and have some understanding of the costs. Like, you know, like I like this idea of understanding what it would cost to plow these things. There must be like formula. It's so much per mile to cost, and we would know what the carrying costs for these, for providing some basic level of service on these unaccepted streets, like we historically seem to have done, is. And so I would like to understand all that before I make any representations that I'm on board with, just abandoning all the streets and letting them figure it out. But I look forward to having this discussion. I think it's going to be important.
Yeah, we recognize that we can't kind of abandon everybody right away, all in one action, but this needs to be a notice that we're acknowledging that we don't own this, that we've had a previous practice of level of care, and that we will phase this out over kind of what we discussed and come up to agreement about, for as good as we're gonna feel about it. I do think a lot of these places could get themselves together and resolve the challenge that they're gonna face, and then there's other areas that will struggle to do that. And we shouldn't leave those folks behind, because they will no longer have access to their property. Emergency services will struggle to get there. That's not the goal here. But it is to be able to balance the expectations. And so, you know, a new homeowner out in North Cove doesn't need to make a phone call every week and say, when are you guys delivering gravel? And be surprised with the answer.
Well, thank you for engaging us on this. I look forward to. I would like to see, I mean, we can certainly update the full council, but I'd like to continue to hold this conversation. That's acceptable.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, thinking out of the box requires a stem of information to be able to envision what an alternative besides the status quo looks like. And we're looking at all, in a lot of ways, possibility of alternative ownership models, presentations about stuff. So, and that means people making decisions about not having all of the, you know, the sticks in the bundle of rights that you get when you buy a property, but, you know, then being able to glom on to other stuff too. You know, there are choices that, you know, people, including asking your lawyer when you bought the house 2 years ago, why they didn't tell you that you had to keep the streets up. And I also don't know why the Parmalos will let the Iranistan and Chittenden go to hell on our buses and our trucks, and perhaps somebody's with greater sway with them than I have can tell them that they own the street, they should keep it up. Anyway, that's my really unsolicited screed. Sorry.
Are there any other councilors who want to get in on that? I guess Becca said no, and nobody wants a second go. No. Well, I guess we can go ahead and close this item. there's no action on it today. We look forward to the ideas that TEUC.
Sounds good, thank you. I'm gonna be here for this next one too.
Okay, next one is.
So.
There's technical services.
So this one, I'm not sure it's titled extremely well, but I do think it's the opportunity to quickly touch on Bank and Cherry that's been mentioned in this meeting before maybe getting to the counselor update session part of it, but what we were hoping to present today is actually in response to what I've heard at a few council meetings, through different conversations with different counselors at different times, what the question that we heard was, how do I plug in? When do I plug in? Where do I plug in? Where can I make an impact here? So Philip is going to go through kind of how our projects work, how we bring them together, where we look for input, where input is a little harder to take. Rob, I don't know if you can shrink down some of the things that are on the screen so the presentation will look better.
I don't know. Hang on. I can give it a try.
Rob's going to do it on our
Yeah.
meeting side.
All right, great. It's not my fault then, thank God.
But before Philip jumps in, I do want to quickly acknowledge, asked by Councilor Bergman, I can hear it, Councilor Brown, McKnight's comments today, and certainly public forum, that we're going to be back to talk in more depth about Bank and Cherry at a future meeting. I don't know why Philip's presentation is so.
It might be on this phone.
Philip, are you presenting on your phone?
No,
No, you're presenting on his vertical screen. Switch screens.
Yes.
hang on a second.
I
I was like, what's the problem here? What are you talking about?
You are the
It
problem.
looks pretty funny.
Hang on.
So we'll be back to talk in more detail on that one as a total separate.
Let's see here. Let's do that.
Otherwise, we can certainly come back if there's other project updates. Philip's going to touch on a few to give examples about as we go through this process. Any of them spark your interest, we can collaborate.
Okay, is that better?
Hold on, it's still loading.
Yes.
Yes.
More better, or is it more gooder? Which one? More better?
Yes. It's
Big jokes. Great. Thanks for letting me be here. Philip Peterson, Senior Transportation Engineer and Planner. Yeah, just to kind of talk about how we get where we get to with a lot of these projects. I know sometimes it can seem a little confusing. So this is kind of an outline of what we're going to discuss. The main thing that I would get across here, this would be the thesis statement, the screen right here. It's a roadmap. How a transportation project goes from us visioning and planning things to something that's in reality. Construction is happening. And the key message, as Laura mentioned, is that opportunities for input from city council and also residents realistically kind of shrinks as we move along from planning into design and then into funding. So let's start with that. I'm going to try and go quickly because I'm sure that you all have comments.
We will give Rob this presentation. We're going to have notes on the bottom of each slide added to the to civic clerk. Kind of Philip's narration becomes part of it, speaking of the challenges we were having with the minutes earlier.
Right. I try and write them all out and write out what I'm going to say. So the planning, right? This is where kind of the vision begins. And this is where a vision becomes policy. And this is when we set our transportation goals and how it aligns with community values, whether it's expanding our bike network, supporting walking, improving transit access, or making our streets safer for everyone. Plans like Plan BTV Walk Bike and the upcoming update to the transportation plan that we're tentatively calling Plan BTV Mobility go through this public process. And City Council, obviously, and the TEUC plays a key role in shaping and adopting those plans. And then what we do as staff is we take those plans and we go, okay, this is what we're going to do. Decisions made here guide pretty much everything that follows. If we're not happy with how projects are showing up later in the pipeline, often the root cause can be traced back to the planning stage. And we were talking about it in a meeting earlier today with the Office of City Planning, and it's a lot like this is where the drudgery can kind of happen. And people can kind of get a little bored with it, just being completely transparent. And then we get into what's called scoping and feasibility. That's where we take those plans and we do things like corridor studies, Or there was a large study done for the Winooski Bridge. We enter this scoping phase, and here we get into technical analysis, traffic volumes, crash history, connectivity, and explore concept level alternative. This is where council, again, can have a very strong influence through public meetings, stakeholder feedback, and then we have this formal adoption of what is referred to as the preferred alternative. Usually that's what we refer to it as. And then city council essentially is choosing what we'll pursue funding for. Obviously, we have recommendations, and most of the time, those are the things that we go with. We have a recommendation, city council usually supports that. This is often the last best opportunity to kind of shape a project before the design gets locked in by grant application. It's also when public excitement or concern can most meaningfully influence the direction of a project. Now, the next two, which is preliminary design and grant funding, can be interchanged. So it's not always that preliminary design comes first. A lot of times, even preliminary design and your grant funding and securing funding can happen in parallel, or sometimes just switch roles completely. Once a preferred concept is adopted, we begin engineering it. This is what's known as 30% designs. We're working out the layout, estimating costs, determining phases. And some input is still possible here. The scope is increasingly defined, and adjustments might include shifting a curb, maybe changing materials, but major redesigns like switching from a shared use path to bike lanes are often just off the table. City council involvement here is still valuable, especially for identifying priorities for phase construction, ensuring equity concerns are addressed, or flagging operational challenges. And then this is kind of like, once we apply for and we accept a grant, especially a federal or state grant, and there are other ways that we get grant funds. AARP has a grant, others that I can't think of off the top of my head. These grants often require detailed scope descriptions, specific cost estimates, timelines, and then if we kind of change the direction, at least in a major way, that's going to risk the funding for the project, and it also risks future funding opportunities because we're kind of eroding these folks' trust, right? We presented something, we said we're going to do this thing, and now we're kind of balking on that. The challenge is that this is when public interest often kind of spikes. But at this point, changes could set the entire project back years, if not happening at all. And that's why early engagement during planning and scoping is so important. Then we get into final design and permitting. Funding is secured, we complete detailed engineering and secure permits. This includes right-of-way. Well, we might be actually doing that already for certain projects, obtaining right-of-way, securing it, doing environmental review, utility coordination. Refinements can still happen. You know, we can adjust the exact location of crosswalks. We can also kind of tweak different things. The overall scope, though, is pretty much locked in. And what I would say is that we, as it says on the slide, we're on the path to construction, and changes can risk a lot of cost and delays. And what we would kind of look for from city council is that city council's role here shifts to helping resolve issues that come up, like constituent concerns, tree removals, or access changes. And your advocacy can help us move past roadblocks that keep projects on schedule. And sometimes those conversations can be very uncomfortable. And then we get into construction. This is we're in the field with contractors, folks are under contract, we're building what was designed and approved, and the public communication is around impacts like detours. Corey and Laura did a great job talking about some of those issues, noise, parking disruptions, but not redesign. And we can't go back to the drawing board at this point. We're too far in the pipeline. Council still plays a key role in supporting staff and helping constituents navigate the temporary challenges that come with construction. We count on counselors to help reinforce that this is a necessary step to deliver community benefits and that disruption is temporary, but the results are lasting and permanent. We'll have a really good product at the end. And then one that, if I'm being transparent, we have a little bit of a blind spot with is operations and maintenance. Construction is complete. We shift to maintaining and doing some performance monitoring. That part we do a pretty good job at. My team does a lot of data collection, but that also includes everything from plowing and street sweeping to repainting bike lanes. And resident feedback is also helpful here. Kind of gives us an insight into what's working and what might need attention. It also informs updates to our existing planning documents, right? Our planning documents are living dynamic things and we do update them. Council can help us connect us with those community observations and ensure we're learning from each project to improve in the next. So kind of a breakdown in terms of city council's role. It really this slide captures the key takeaway. Council has maximum influence early in the process, and so do residents. Residents have that maximum influence, but very limited ability to make changes once we've entered the design and funding phases. That's why it's so important for council to stay engaged at the planning and scoping stages, especially when we're setting transportation goals and selecting preferred alternatives. So if changes are made too late, they can put funding at risk or require us to restart years of work. And that's not good for anybody, staff, council, it's not good for residents. So I have 3 real projects that kind of show how these stages work in practice. Just 3 that I kind of grabbed. They're all VTrans grant funded. We have the Intervale roadside path. We secured VTrans funding for, I think that's a TAP grant. Maybe that's not, no, Lake Street is.
Okay.
Yep. So any attempt to change the kind of these projects at this stage and not commit to deliver what we've proposed would risk funding. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, the folks that are funding this, in this case, VTrans, they're going to have less trust in us in the future. And they're going to be like, wait a second, you know, you didn't really finish what was on your plate. You can't come up for another serving. So these are great examples of why timing really is very important and how your leadership throughout the full project life cycle is essential. Okay, so I spoke really fast, a lot of words quickly, but I wanted to give you all an opportunity to get into some discussion around it.
I do just want to highlight, you know, I can appreciate that these grant funded projects take 5 years, you know, and sometimes council turnover in that time frame can be really hard. Entering something at one of those limited input opportunities because these projects do just naturally take so long to get through the federalized process. Lake Street is a 2021 grant, Intervale is a 2022 grant, both of which have an earliest construction of 2027. So they unfortunately do take a long time and they kind of sit in that like you can't change anything period for a long period of time.
It's true.
Committee members?
Do you want to take your screen down so we can see?
Sure. I can do that.
I'll let Becca go first this time.
Hi, thank you. I'm finally sitting still. I can turn my video on. This is really helpful, and I have a couple of just reactions and follow-up questions. I'll just say them all. I think it's really only 2 main things, but and then let you guys respond. So the first thing, I think it's really good and important to know that planning phase is the best place to give input. And I participated in the walk bike action plan, so I feel like I've had a chance. And then we looked at I'm forgetting the name of the plan that we went in a lot of detail with Charles on in this committee. But so I've sort of recently been through 2 of those planning phases. I will say though that I feel like in both of those situations, there were concerns that I had with the plans, but what I was told was, oh, don't worry about it, Becca, this is just a plan. It's not a final commitment. We're just getting all the ideas out there. It's a vague roadmap. It's not final. So I guess I'm concerned to hear that moment is my best chance to give input when my input wasn't factored in because it was, I'm thinking about the residential parking plan. We specifically asked for that to be taken out, and then it wasn't taken out. And so that makes me feel like there is no opportunity for council input, which I mean, I don't truly believe that's the case, but that's what happened in that experience. So I think we have some work to do there. And if that's really our best place for input, I think the narrative of don't worry about this, it's just a plan, should stop. So that's thing number one. And then thing number two is just that I do think as we look to the future as a city, and I don't have the answers to this, and I know it would take probably a decade, but I think it would be smart to build in a little more flexibility throughout our process, because like what we saw with Main Street is like pretty much almost, maybe half the council had voted on that, and there were a lot of last minute negotiations. The mayor's administration turned over in the middle of it, and we were faced with a bit of a crisis. And of course, it was too late to change a lot of things, but we still, as city leaders, we have to deal with a crisis when it shows up at our doorstep. And we need, I think going through that process for me showed me we need more tools to do that. And so I don't know if that's something that maybe can be handled in the contract process, or it's maybe just something that we all have to kind of hold in our mind and guide our decisions with. But, at a certain point, if there's, and these days a crisis can take so many forms. Like what if there had been another pandemic in the middle of the construction project, or there's some sort of major macroeconomic thing that changes the whole price of steel, or there's, a geopolitical crisis. I mean, we do have to, this is the world we live in, and we have to adapt constantly. And the climate, torrential downpours, like somebody mentioned this earlier with the Champlain Parkway, like that's changing how long it takes to make asphalt. So I would just ask that we think about that just as a team, and where we can build more flexibility into that process. And then another piece, the last thing I'll say is that something I would love to see us do, and I know I've heard the mayor talk about this in terms of fiscal planning, which I think is a great idea. We should really be on like a 3 to 5 year plan for our budget. I would love to see the same thing in the transportation department, where anyone who comes into the council could get a plan of like, here's the, let's say you're in for 2 terms, here's all the construction projects you could expect to see in the next 4 years. Because one thing I'm concerned about is it seems like we're doing too much at once. And I would like, of course, we all want everything done all the time. And of course, there's, you apply for a grant and the grant's only available that year. And if you don't apply, you miss it. And there's all those considerations. But I think it would be good for the city, being in such a growth phase, like just to stagger all these projects so we don't have the Champlain Parkway and Main Street going on at the same time. And when I'm making decisions, I don't feel like I have that information easily accessible. And so it's hard to even like ask the right questions and understand the cohesive impact of these projects. So I'll stop there. Thank you for this overview, though. It's very helpful.
Thanks, Sharon. Others?
So just to, I think, give some clarification on what Becca was saying in terms of plans and when you get to input. The plan that she was talking about was a plan around transportation demand management that was not a transportation planning document, particularly the resident parking. So there, I think that's on the outside, because we can clearly craft ordinances to deal with it. I do think, though, that her point, the last point in terms of getting the information, so that we're absolutely clear about all the projects that are happening, and the stages that they're in, and what people can expect is really important. And we've got certain things already. You can go to the website, but at the end of the day, we are reacting to, a 360 degree, 3D or 4 or 5 dimensions in terms of the things that we're interested in, right? So our ability to sort of focus on one is hurt, and therefore we need to be able to, I think, have some more tools. That's particularly important because if the maximum impact that we've got is in the planning stage around plans, those are not necessarily well connected to the projects. And having just spent the time with the Battery Street scoping project, which is sort of out there, now, you know, there are going to be changes in life that are going to be in between the scoping stage and then those preliminary, the grant application. And so I think that that's a gap that we need to fill. And there are many ways I think we can probably fill them. I won't sort of list it, but you know, I mean, that's what we need to like think about, because as times change, right, our assumptions change and people are reacting to things too. So the public's expectations are altered in that, you know, in this gap period. Not quite a gap year, like students, but there's an aspect of that. So I think that we definitely would improve doing better in that regard. And the tying of the projects to the plans is another area which I think it right now is like too esoteric. There isn't a really clear place where we can say, okay, we did this planning. Now we got this project. Where does it fit in there? If we don't want, if we have the maximum impact, citizens, residents, and counselors in the planning stage, you know, how does that now meet the actual projects that we're dealing with? And so I think that's worthy of some greater thinking. And then, you know, when you get to the construction phase and we don't have a lot of choices or a lot of role, you know, really sort of understanding really granularly what that is as it relates to people's lives. So and we dealt with the bank Cherry Street, you know, like 2 years ago. And we did not have the experience of Main Street to judge. And none of us, as a result, yeah, exactly.
I'm a little offended, there's St. Paul Street, but yes.
Well, I mean, I'm cutting you some slack here, Laura. I'm saying, here, this is your escape, you know?
We learned lessons from all of our projects and we're learning lessons from Main Street and.
So, you know, so perhaps part of that project now is to be being able to bring it back. And it maybe if it's even in a, you know, if it's still being scoped or, you know, where this is in that phase where we can learn and doing the front loading of it, because I do think that, and I'll end with saying, I don't agree with not necessarily doing multiple projects at the same time. I think you have to do that if we're going to survive, but doing them smartly and rightly and taking into account the flow of people and the economic impacts really critically important. And if we can't pull that off, then yeah, then you got to do one at a time. And maybe we can't walk and chew gum at the same time. You have to decide which one you're going to do.
I do just want to quickly address, you know, I've heard basically these two kind of squishy middles of where input and refinement could occur, and I don't want to make sure, I want to make sure that Councilor McKnight's concern about we'll address this later. Usually that we'll address this later is happening as your city teams are working on developing their grant applications, that we are resolving this, like we will figure this out later. We're figuring out those things before we're generally applying for something, but I can see where there's a moment where we should be having an update, not necessarily a full-blown public vetting session, but like, let's have an update, let's have a gut check with enough of the public before we're moving forward with kind of these key changes that update something that respond to current social conditions, climate conditions, pandemic conditions. And And we are actually gonna do that with Bank and Cherry. We're definitely coming back around to you guys. We're coming back around to the businesses right now. We're working with BVA to continue to get those lessons learned, those updates. And we'll be asking, not what do you think about the whole project, but what do you think about these specific things?
Yeah, I would love to address the resident parking comment as well.
We don't have-
I'll just say quickly that that's a strategy in TDM to get into the granularity around making any changes to the resident parking management plan. That's a lot of work and a lot of engagement with the public. So we wouldn't just say, okay, well, that's a great idea, we'll just do it. No, it's a lot of engagement around that.
Due for an update, so coming as a future item.
Excellent. I'm gonna defer some comments on this, because Becca and Gina have covered some stuff. I do wonder, like, there's no action on this, so this is just.
This is something that we just noticed as a missing piece of information. There was a lot of new counselors this round, and even the previous round, and even sometimes that have been here for a little while that have come up with these same conversations,
Yes.
so.
It's another language, really. It's just getting everybody to speak the same language when it comes to these projects so that, you know, we're all on the same page.
Understood. Well, thank you for bringing. Go ahead, Becca. I'm sorry.
Sorry, am I allowed to say more? I'll be quick.
Absolutely, but we just, I'm being mindful of the time and.
I know, sorry.
12:05 now.
I just think this is a really important conversation. I wanted to just share two quick little mini examples. And I think I also didn't say this when I spoke first, but I mean, I have so much respect and appreciation for the work that you all do. I mean, it's so professionally technical and difficult, and you're great at it. So thank you for that. And I think it's important for us to all say that as often as possible. I also think it's really awesome that you're coming to the table with this process and looking at improving it, and, you know, way to go with that. And I think that's great. I do think it's also important, like, to have and I feel like our input is very heard and absorbed, and I appreciate that. But, you know, I think it's important that we have, like, counselors, we see and observe the city in such a different way than DPW staff does. And I think that interplay is really key. And so just to share two examples that I've observed, just driving around and hearing from constituents, like, there was one time where on Main Street going out of the city, the Parks Department was tree trimming, and they had limited Main Street up the hill right by the green to one lane only. And I happened to be driving downtown, and the whole town was backed. It was really backed up in that intersection, and the whole rest of the town was backed up. And it was basically because I think Pine Street was closed, Main Street's closed, and it's like we cut off the main outlet from the city to one lane. And then I told Chapin about it, and it turned out he didn't even know they were doing that. And so I think that's one tiny example. And the other small example that has a big impact is the city market closure of the parking lot. That was sort of a de facto way to cut across town. And I didn't realize that was getting closed. And so now you can't sneak through the parking lot if College Street is too busy, which of course I know is not technically the right way to drive, but it does happen. And so those are two little things that I wouldn't have necessarily even expected you all to communicate to that to us. But I think those little things are really adding up. And with the big projects going on, those little tweaks, I think we need to just look at them a lot more carefully. Like, the Parks Department needs to be letting you all know anytime they close a street. And you need to have a chance to give them feedback on, like, hey, maybe today's not the day to do that because we don't have any other intersections open in the city. And so yeah, I just wanted to share those two small examples, because I think as we move towards a system that is like you were saying, Laura, like having more opportunities to have a feedback loop in the process, I think the little things matter a lot too, not just the big things. So thank you so much for this, and we can just plan to continue on all these conversations.
Thanks, Becca, and thanks, Philip. Okay, I'm gonna close this item and we'll move on to our last item on our deliberative agenda, the GMT assessment methodology study. Yep. And so this item, I believe, Rob, you sent around an email to the two
Yes,
members, but it's not posted.
it is posted now and
Is it? I thought it might not be the agenda. When I just tried to open it, it was just the agenda.
It says agenda, it's an agenda that's attached.
It was the wrong thing, was an attempt, but it.
let me.
It's okay.
You have the presentation.
No, this is, we were told we have about 15 minutes, so
Yeah.
this is entirely verbal
Okay.
today, but just to clarify, this will not be the last opportunity for the city of Burlington, either the council or public works staff to be in on this. In fact, we have multiple meetings. So to start really very quickly, I'm Peter Pulno, this is Michelle Hobbs. We're with a small consultancy based here in Burlington called Reframe Lab. We've been hired, we were hired a few weeks ago by GMT to work with them on revisiting their funding structure, essentially. Particularly the municipal assessment model that they use that kind of goes hand in hand with the governance model that is in place right now. We're focused on the urban communities under GMT since you may or may not know that the rural service has been essentially separated and delegated to others within the last few weeks. So what we're here today to begin a conversation with you about is your perspectives on how GMT is funded, the municipal assessments that Burlington and several other communities pay annually, how those assessments are arrived at and developed, and options for the future in your mind as we try to help GMT kind of move back to a more sustainable long-term structure that really serves Burlington and serves the region for the long term in many ways. So with that, I'm going to, and just to be clear, we're not looking for answers today, we're looking for input. And so the study will continue for several months. So I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. She has a few key questions that she'd like to talk with you about.
Yeah, knowing that we're limited for time, they're kind of in 4 different categories. And we're just looking for your perspectives from your committee and your outlook. So the first is, how would you describe GMT's value to Burlington's residents, Burlington's employers, or overall community goals regarding mobility, equity, economic development? And what role do you see public transit playing in Burlington's future?
Did you, and I see these questions in the document that was shared with the society committee. Are you expecting answers for these now, or would you want to go through the questions and we could start to give you some of our initial thoughts? How would the committee like, would the committee like to take these one by one?
I don't think we have, but this is, I don't know if that's gonna take us.
There's four questions. I don't know who's had an opportunity to look at them. Maybe it might be best just to like queue it up, and we will. This committee's been very active and activist in trying to address GMT funding issues. So,
and we're aware that Burlington pays a substantial amount.
We would have plenty of input for you. Wouldn't have to prod us very much to give you lots of input on GMT. So maybe we could just go through the questions now. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Or and then we could maybe figure out. I'm thinking out loud as we're the time we have. We would. We could maybe offer some thoughts. Go through the questions. Offer you some thoughts, and then we can each send you.
You could, or we can come back, in a few weeks, saying that there is something of a time is of the essence associated with this. Our recommendations. We're hoping to have recommendations for whatever restructuring new model by mid-October to GMT. So.
So you'd want any input from this committee by, I mean, like.
In August.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
which I know is with holiday and vacation season is something of a tall order as well, so. We appreciate, and just for what it's worth, we literally started reaching out to you and the other municipalities and other stakeholders within the last week.
Okay.
And Champlain Spencer actually was nice enough to facilitate getting us in front of you quickly. And of course, he's out of town this week, so he's not here, but we are meeting with him next week as in his role as former GMT chair. So, but I think maybe we can just kind of tee up the questions and a few initial thoughts, feedback would be good, and then we can kind of go from there.
Sure.
Yeah, so we're just trying to understand kind of your understanding of what value GMT provides to Burlington residents, from your perspective, either directly to the community or in a broader sense, and how that plays with Burlington's future. To what degree are you familiar with the funding and assessment model, and is there clarity around that, or what aspects about that funding model do you have a position or a perspective that helps us understand if it's working well or not so well from a Burlington perspective? Thinking through what kind of governance structure and funding model, how well that works for you in terms of your understanding Burlington's position and its citizens, and what changes would you like to see to improve the coordination, particularly in the region, in the urban areas, to achieve financial equity. So just kind of broader thinking around perspectives in terms of what does that mean for Burlington? What does that mean for the region? To what clarity, what kind of clarity can you provide, or do they provide for you? That relationship. What other things should GMT be thinking about as they're looking at this funding adjustment?
Excellent. I know Becca has a hard stop at 5, so I don't know if you had any initial thoughts you wanted to squeeze in here, Becca, before you have to drop off.
Sure, thank you. I mean, I can put some thoughts together in writing, but I did just want to share, I mean, GMT is essential to Burlington. I think everybody on this committee is going to say the same thing, but I did a tour of our new high school yesterday, and I think it's really important to call out, we don't have school buses here in Burlington. So if we don't have GMT, the kids can't get to school. And I mean, I think that's just one small example, but that is so essential, obviously. I mean, the chair of the school board was on the tour, and she said she's worried that they're going to have to figure that out, which is very frightening. And so, and the new school design has a beautiful wide road for buses to come in and for the GMT to drop the students off. And so I think that small example, I think that's a really powerful example to include in your feedback to the powers that be, because it just shows how much we rely on this service, and you can pretty clearly see the impact that there would be if that was either reduced or taken away. So I just wanted to share that small anecdote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Becca. Eric?
I talk a lot. I wouldn't
So
say
that's
so.
all changed.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
I mean, this is something that is very important to me. Transportation, public transportation especially. So I would really appreciate it if y'all came back and I could have more prepared comments as all of us. But I don't know where to begin with the first question. It's in public transport in any urban area, invaluable from an economics perspective of being able to get people of all classes, all walks of life to and from everywhere they need to be in their city and in adjoining municipalities and areas. Climate and quality of life in general, but you see the traffic, if there were more people. That had access to public transit that is reliable and available and accessible. Both within the city of Burlington and people commuting from elsewhere in Vermont. It reduces traffic, it reduces emissions. Again, valuable. And the same thing can be applied to economic development if allowing people to have where they live. And where they work. It turns the gears in places, especially in places like Burlington. I'm decently familiar with the way that the funding and the assessment and model works. I know about the funding like structure, but I'm more iffy on the assessment model, the formulas and stuff. So I can't really speak to how I would change the assessment formula for local funding. But I would say that, and I would be the idealist here, is that I don't think municipalities should be directly paying a GMT at all. I think it should be absorbed by the state, and we should be able to fund public transit across all of Vermont. But that's a little pie in the sky right now. But I do think that we need to be able to see how much each municipality is paying in, how that needs to be potentially rescaled based off of demand, and if maybe getting into other municipalities with higher populations relative to the state itself would in a wraparound way increase that funding and make it more stable while still providing more access to public transit to people in Vermont. Yeah, we've gone back and forth about Burlington's funding, especially in regards to when we gave up fare free transit and when we had capped it for a portion of Route 11. That's now no longer the case. There were multiple reasons besides just money to make the whole fare process more efficient. There were many reasons, but yeah, I want to see public transit expand. So I think that GMT deserves more money. It's hard just for me to stand up though and say that Burlington can provide more money. And I'm sure people in the other municipalities would say the same thing. So that's why I think that the state should be playing a larger role in funding. I'm not super familiar with the governance structure, but in the same way as the funding may need to be properly scaled based on demand, I think that the governance structure also needs to be scaled based on demand. I think Burlington is woefully underrepresented in terms of voting members. And then opportunities for working more collaboratively. I'm a huge fan of just city governments and town governments working more collaboratively. Big fan of the Vermont League of City and Towns, what they're trying to do in terms of that lately. So I think that definitely applies to public transportation. If I could get in the ear of our counterparts in Vermont and other cities, I would love to have that type of conversation, and maybe GMT could facilitate something like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I agree with Merrick. From my standpoint, right now, GMT is a lifeline to poor people in this country, in this city, and without it, most people are giving it in economic crime. They didn't have transportation. And it relates to like where people need to go. By life, you need to go to the doctor, you need to go to work, you need to go to shop. Yeah, and you need to go to family, and stuff. And those are like sort of the basics. And we are not doing a great job of that because the head times are just so poor that a fit person like me can basically walk and can most definitely ride my bike. Most places, I mean, or, you know, so it's only when you get out of town where you've got that, you know, difficult getting to South Burlington. Sucks. I don't do it because I won't ride my bike. I'd probably walk faster than bus. Maybe if the changes are so that. So I mean, I really see public transit as needing to make a fundamental change because our future does need it for all the things that. And I think we're in avoiding a debt more than, and so we haven't had a chance to really look at that. So the whole funding system is broken, and this committee has been saying that, including in resolution, just trying to get in the legislature to say, pony up, give us the opportunity to do that, and they have failed miserably. So I think that, let me end with, you know, this, regionalization is really important because you gotta have, people need to go to all these different places and they're not all in Burlington. And so we have to have a regional structure, and we've got to be able to have the bus come by quicker, 15 minutes that, the head time that we, it's the ideal time, is it 10 minutes? It's
it depends on
now
precise route and demand, but yes, probably much quicker than today.
And now, well, a half hour, an hour, I mean, that's just off the charts. And so, being able to for GMT itself to be involved in the transportation planning is really important, right? I've talked to Clayton about their link and with Chris Dammy about their link with TDM and getting employers and getting new developers involved, and they're not looking at it. And you've got, I think, the CAPMA system, are they running the CAPMA? Are they running those CAPMA buses, or somebody else running those?
CAPMA doesn't operate any buses. They do a lot of coordination and.
No, but those white buses that for like UVM and they go down to Lakeside.
Oh, I think those are run by either the institutions or a contractor.
So it sort of makes little to no sense that you've got that. I think, like South Burlington is pushing back now because there are like 3 different shuttle services trying to get UVM people to go from, or run on Market Street, going up to the hospital and going to, I mean, like in what planet does that make any sense? Doesn't make any sense to have that level of discoordination. So funding model is a piece of this, but it really does speak to a unity of the transportation management systems that we've got, of which the bus is a vital.
Yes, I hope you can come back, because I think we could
How frequently do you meet?
once a month typically. Probably our next one would be
Approximately.
Usually the 4th Tuesday.
Site work.
We can also provide you feedback individually in email, which wouldn't be a discussion, but we're all sort of versed in many of these topics. So well, leave it to you. I do think it's important. I welcome the discussion. I'm a little bit of a cynic. We've been at this, I've been on this committee for 4 years, and we put 3 resolutions. We've to the state legislature. Clayton's our most frequent guest here at this committee, because we're talking about what, like how we're gonna scratch and claw and make things work. most times when he's there, it's usually not good news when he comes. And so I'm a little cynical at this point. You know, my daughter goes to school in Scotland, and I go over there and I can be on the side of a sheep farm, and I can get a bus in like 12 minutes to come by and pick me up and take me somewhere, connect me to another bus. So it's not about the rural nature of Vermont, it's about the transportation priorities of the state. And we don't have priorities in this state around GMT. There's no ability to do any kind of strategic planning because every single legislative session, it's like, you know, where are we gonna come up with the money? How deep are the cuts gonna be this year? And it doesn't seem to be getting better. And now I think we're at a point where regionally even, there's certain communities that are questioning whether or not they want to participate. And once you start losing communities, the whole network starts to fall. So we're sort of in a dire state at the moment for GMT, I think. But we're, I think, as a city all in for GMT. It's part of our transportation plan. It's part of our climate strategy. It's, you know, it's like interweaved with everything that we're doing.
Interestingly, to your point, if I could, if you look at the comp plans of every community that's a member of GMT, every single one of them says they prioritize transit. They want transit expanded. They want transit invested in. They want TOD, TDM, everything. So, you know, it would seem to be an opportunity, but like you said, it's like the how, right? And
yeah.
So we, you know, I know we're probably over time here, but I want to mention that this study that we're doing with a partner, in addition to these local stakeholder meetings and listening sessions that we're going to be having to understand, frankly, the current perspectives and aspirations as well as we can. We're going to be doing what we call scenario analyses of different funding models and how they might or might not work for the long term. And we're also going to be looking at comparable urban metro areas around the country and their systems and how they work. And of course, you know, Vermont is unique, as any state is unique from others, right? Vermont is particularly unique is the lack of county governments, which may or may not be an important factor. But so this study is going to be pretty holistic looking at this. And again, the idea is to have an actual set of recommendations for GMT to work with and with its member communities and I guess with the state legislature going into next year. So I think it would be great to for us to plan to be on your next agenda. And maybe if you could give us a little more time, you know, that would make sense. And
I think you were a late addition.
Yes, that is my understanding. So we really do appreciate it, though. You know, we have 7 more of these to do. Right?
Yes, nothing. I mean, we're on your radar now, so that's helpful.
You know, I'm a little on the fence about asking you each individually to send us comments. If there's a way to compile them into one document, that would be great.
We can probably, maybe I can coordinate with committee members and we can compile them, we can assemble them.
Yeah, and I can leave you my card just so you have the direct info. But well, thank you very much. Appreciate the candor and the input. This is obviously a thorny issue and
extremely important.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, that ends our deliberative agenda. I have public safety committee starting in 14 minutes and I sort of. So I'm going to, is there, do any council have items they want to talk about prior to bus security. None, that has already left us. There's no direction. Our next meeting is tentatively at,
Thank you, everyone.
our next meeting is on the 26th of August. Does that work for everybody?
I will be out of not only state, but I will have no internet access, but.
Okay, is there a time when you have internet access and in
Yeah,
that,
not on that day.
in that week?
The answer is on Friday, the 29th. I'm leaving on Sunday. I'm coming back on Thursday. Really don't come back until late in the afternoon. So Friday, the 29th is a day which I have.
That work? Does that work for you?
Yeah, just, we need to go back to.
Later in the day?
Yeah.
5 o'clock? I don't know about Becca, but she's not here to vote, so why don't we, can we get a room on Friday, the 29th?
Labor Day weekend.
Oh, that's,
Yeah,
oh, that
that's
is.
I am available the
Week before?
but
What is-
and you can, I mean, life goes on, so.
I know, I'd like to get you in on some of the PED study stuff, though, since they came out of your additions to
They did,
resolution.
they did.
And then we have a couple of those.
I am really open on the 18th, 19th and 20th.
18th, 19th and 20th.
And I have an ordinance committee on the 21st, but that goes from 4:30 till like 6, I guess, so
Well,
I can do it on a Thursday. Like
18th,
after that.
19th and 20th.
And the 21st in the evening, like at 7.
I don't wanna, I mean, personally, I'd like to start us earlier for staff as well. 18th, 19th, 20th, I'm looking, well, I'm in July, that's why. We don't have council, we have council on the.
So the 25th, yes, I'm gonna be.
So we could do 18th, 19th, 20th, wanna try the 9th, does anybody wanna try the 19th?
I'm totally free.
The room at 6:45 is booked by the DRB until from 4 to 7 tentatively. Can we find another room? Yeah, I can double check on this.
This room is unavailable starting at 5:30 for the RFP. We could always ask BED about the Spark space.
Yeah, we can do that, we'll find a room.
We can find, yeah, either BED Spark Space. We have a second location at 645 Pine that would be tighter, that we've had this meeting in before, so.
Right.
We'll
Right,
probably.
I think we're gonna have guests, but I don't know if they're all gonna be in person.
And if BED's on the next agenda, unless they have
Yeah,
something.
they have two items.
Right.
Spark room would be great
Okay,
for them
let's see if we can get in there.
I'll follow up on.
because there'll be an interest. People will go.
Yeah, it will be a public forum.
Chair, what time did you suggest starting?
5 PM to accommodate Eric's schedule, but that's when. So during the summer, flexing our time.
Should I change my date?
Yes, let's change it to the 19th. If that's good with everybody, we'll let that in.
Sending
Maybe we can get a placeholder and send the clerks.
I'll do that. I'll check on Spark and per Councilor McKnight's request, I'm now sending out a joint request to everyone's calendar, so that'll be
Okay.
coming through too, so hopefully you see that.
I have Peter Plumo's info that he left me on his card. I'll just write it down and send it to you.
I've got, I'm in touch with him, so we can get him on. If that's where you and Chip are.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Further business, seeing none, I will adjourn us at 5:21. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, to people that hung with us.
Thank you, everybody. Sure.